Hi guys, my name is Gareth. Welcome to my channel. Today I am going to be talking about the next installment in the series of awakening videos I have been making recently. I have gone through quite a few of them now: witnessing consciousness, self-realization, God consciousness, unity consciousness. And today I am talking about Brahman, the Great Awakening, and I'm gonna really try. It's a very, very difficult one to talk about, so I'll do my best. With all of the videos I make, I'm always just talking from direct experience, right? I'm not scholarly. I do not study scriptures. I do not study other people's work on awakening. I don't know. I don't know, if that's the right thing or the wrong thing, but it's just been how I've done it. So I'm going to talk about it from my perspectives, from how I experienced it. If you are, kind of, uh, and let's just, put something in context as well around Brahman. Brahman is quite a rare occurrence. It seems to be increasing recently in recent years. I have been lucky enough to interview a number of people, David Buckland, Luciano, and Rastal, who have all gone to Brahman and beyond, right? There's later stages. Luciano and Rastal, if you watch my podcast, the Endless Possibilities podcast, um, I interviewed the two of them twice, and we spoke about Brahman and beyond, and a later stage called Omni and Omni integration. So yeah, so let's just kind of recap a little bit on what actually is happening during the awakening process, right? Because I want to shift people's perspectives from thinking that awakening is some sort of an attainment, right? It's like, oh, something happens and my life changes and everything is much better, right? It's not really the case, right? Awakening is basically a deconstruction of the mechanisms of what we believe ourselves to be, our personalities, um, certain constructs and beliefs uh, that are ingrained really, really like at a bone and sinew level. Have these beliefs, we hold on to them. They literally are what we believe ourselves to be. And in spiritual awakening, we are waking up to, we are waking up from the false identity of our personality, our mind, our ego, our beliefs, our traumas, everything that makes up this, right? This being, this individual. So as we go through the awakening, right, they seem to happen in shifts, right? It's like a click or a pop or an aha moment in some of the shifts. And what follows is a refinement of that state. So it's like a veil or like a like a membrane that comes down to reveal what has always been there. Okay? It's like a veil or a curtain falls, right? That first awakening, it's like when it came down from me, it was like, oh, okay. I was convinced I was this, right? This mind, this personality. I was convinced that, me as an individual had to strive, had to become more, had to go, achieve, do all of these things. And when that first veil came down, it was like, oh, at the center of what I am is unbounded, eternal peace, stillness, awareness, right? And the shifting from thinking that you are this to that, it's like, oh, I thought I was this. I thought I had to strive. I thought I had to survive, you know, hustle, work, this, and it's exhausting. It really, really is such an exhausting um, state when you believe that, right? And what happens is you shift from the identification of this into, oh, I'm awareness. And it's awareness just literally wakes up through you. The personality is still there, the ego is still there. And I'm not going to go back over it, right? If you want to go back into the previous videos, do, right? So there's more stages of consciousness then looking out through the eyes, seeing itself in the world, unity, becoming one with everything. Um, so it's like, and, okay, so another video I made was all about meditation, why we meditate during spiritual awakening to help with it. So what we're doing is we're moving from the identification with body, mind, personality to, oh, I thought I was that. I close my eyes, I meditate, there's awareness, right? Now, meditation, difficult in the beginning, where the mind is very active. It's pulling us into scenarios. It's pulling our attention. It almost feels like it doesn't want us to uncover what we are. And what we're doing in meditation is basically uncovering what has always been there. So we're sitting, we're coming out of the mind into the body. The struggling is quietening down, the thinking, the analyzing, projecting, and we're, okay, that part is quieting down, and I'm awareness. And each meditation, each time we sit in that state, each time we close our eyes, we're connecting to that eternal part of ourselves over and over and over again. And this doesn't happen overnight. This is like a process that's refining, right? And that's the only way I can describe it is it's like this is it's like have you ever come across like old castles where, over hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, people have been walking upstairs and the stairs start to like, they start to have a groove in them. The concrete becomes, or the stone becomes almost like, really, really smooth and concaved or concaved. So this is kind of like what's happening every time we're meditating. We're refining that. We're like literally deconstructing all the mind, the personality, the beliefs. We're just, I thought I was that. I thought this was the way it was, and I'm peeling back layers. I'm uncovering what is there, what has always been there, what always will be there. right? And as that happens, it's like there's more and more recognition of, oh, no matter what happens to me, the body, the mind, the personality, I always exist. I'm always here. I am an eternal being. I am awareness. So this is what's happening as you're going through your spiritual awakening, right? You're you're peeling back layers and layers, and you're revealing more of what you have always been and always will be, right? The eternal self. But the eternal self is within creation, okay? It's like you, as the body mind, are in the world, and at the center of what you are is awareness, right? And you're uncovering that awareness. And there's stages, and eventually what happens is it feels like the limitations of what you are come down, and your awareness expands out into everything, and you kind of see yourself as everything, right? I am one with everything. I am one with my reality. I'm one with everyone else. You know, these are the stages that you're uncovering, right? That you're not attaining them. You're not, you're not, you're not, um, you're not gaining anything. The individual is not having, it's not like you're, getting little ticks or stars along the way, right? You're actually just deconstructing. You're breaking down. The individual, the ego is actually losing more than it's gaining. And I'm kind of trying to lead up to the Brahman shift. So in Brahman consciousness, right, we have already uncovered the soul or the self at the center of what we are, right? It's there. We are it. It's us. We you know we're sitting in it. We have access to it. And now what seems to be happening is that when we meditate, I'm gonna use sort of like the bubble, right? It's like the self is a bubble, and the bubble is getting pulled back up against a membrane. Okay. And on the other side of that membrane is the absolute unbound awareness, right? Primordial, no experience of itself, just dim consciousness, dim awareness, just there. Okay. So Brahman consciousness is a going back. It's a deconstructing of everything we've once believed ourselves to be. And what's happening is we're meditating, right? Our baseline consciousness is always the self. And every time we're meditating, we're getting closer and closer and closer back to that primordial sea where we've once come from. The bubble is sitting on the edge. We're getting deep into meditation, getting almost sucked into that Brahman, but coming back and forth, sitting, going into that samadhi state over and over and over again. And sometimes actually even like disappearing, breaking through until eventually at one stage, the self, the absolute actually reaches in and pulls that awareness back into itself, right? It actually breaks through the membrane and becomes Brahman. So the self, it's taken, almost pulled out of creation through the membrane, passes through the membrane and becomes Brahman, right? And that's what I spoke about in the last video, where one day I was just meditating and all of a sudden it was like as if I was faced with a black hole, an abyss, and I knew that I had to go into it. And it felt like I was going to be obliterated, no coming back, no experience. Sheer terror just came up in that instant, and boom, I was taken. And what happens is your awareness now is Brahman. It knows itself as Brahman. Okay. And eventually, when it comes back into creation, right, the individual comes back around and there is a sense of, oh, what has just happened? Right? Everything, everything I ever believed has been literally dismantled, pulled apart. I thought I was life. I thought I was beingness. I thought I was bliss. I thought I was God. And all of a sudden, I have now been pulled into absolute nothingness. Nothing exists there. No experience, no love, no joy, no suffering. Everything has been taken away. And you come back and you're like, what has just happened? What is that? Why did that happen? And for me, this this happened in not just one shift. So before the unity shift for me, I had the experience of Brahman. Um, and it was very, very unhinging for the individual. Um, I had no framework whatsoever for what happened to me. And it didn't it didn't manifest as a, the shift into Brahman. I still had to go through more refinement. I still had to shift into unity. I still had to have an understanding. So I had had the experience of being pulled into that nothingness. And I can't remember exactly, 6 months later, I then started to listen to the teachings of the secret yoga of the Bhagavad Gita, and they talk about Brahman and what it is. And I was like, oh, and I had a friend at the time who was also going through the awakening at a very kind of similar stages to me. And we were both talking about this Brahman shift. And I was like, it doesn't make any sense to me because I was really convinced that these were linear shifts. And I was like, well, you know, I had that before unity and it just didn't make any sense to me. How could I have had that before unity? And then as I started to have a sort of an intellectual understanding of what this Brahman was, and I remember one day meditating and seeing a vision of these snowy mountaintops and the god Shiva sitting. Shiva is the unmanifest. Um, yeah. So I had seen Shiva and I heard the word you and I are now one, or Shiva and you are yeah, one, so one and the same, or something like that. And when I came out of the meditation, it was like, oh, okay, I see what's happened, or I could, the shift of Brahman kind of set in all of a sudden. And what it felt like was I had now seen true reality. I could see that everything that I was perceiving was illusion, illusory. It was almost like that I could tell that everything was somehow a projection, consciousness being projected onto a screen. And the screen was nothingness, right? So me, somehow as the experiencer, my awareness was both within me and somehow simultaneously was existing outside of creation. Almost like, it's like I'll use the analogy of like, an astronaut who gets pulled out of the ship or something in a suit and is floating in space. There's just nothing really there. So it felt like I was somehow here and there in the nothingness simultaneously. And everything that I could perceive, right, through my senses was somehow being projected onto that screen of nothingness, right? And somehow I knew that if I could somehow go to the corner, right, of where my field of vision kind of started at the corners of my eyes, and if I was able to kind of peek around, I knew that everything was at the back of that. There was just nothingness. I knew that every person that I met, when I would meet them, they would manifest right in front of me, and when they would leave, they would just crumble or disappear. And it kind of over the next days and weeks, I was kind of getting to sense this more and more and more that actually everything was just arising for me to have an experience and then crumbling when it wasn't there. So it kind of felt like I just knew, right? And the physicists talk about this, the double slit experiment of, basically reality is only there if there is somebody to observe it, right? And I was like, oh, and this is not an intellectual understanding. This is literally like you have become that nothingness. And now all of a sudden you can tell that everything is somehow now you don't understand what is projecting it, right? You're seeing, okay, there's a reality, I'm here. I can see that there's, this is a wall. That's the world. That's the trees. This is a person, right? But you just know that behind that is nothingness. You are that nothingness. And then everything is somehow been projected. But you don't really understand what's the projection. This came later for me. So at, the, this was kind of like now the Great Awakening. You I had been pulled out of creation. It was like creation, the karmic wheel collapsed, right? Before I was still in it, even though you're going through these awakenings, even though you're in unity with everything. Oh, this is me, this is my creation. Uh, but you still feel like you're part of it energetically, karmically. If you do something, there's like a karmic law, right? And you're still bound by that law. When you shift into Brahman, it's like it breaks. It's like you're no longer tied. Gravity doesn't pull you down. You've now broke free. And again, no studying, no listening to anybody, but I just knew on a knowing level that I was no longer accumulating karma, that it was no longer, I was no longer being bound to this earth by karma. And if it kind of feels like it's like, oh, I can actually do anything, and there's no consequences. Now you don't, it's not that you do, or it's not that you want to do anything, or that you can now have, free reign to act any way you want to, because you've gone through that, right? It's like the ego is has been refined over time. You've awoken, the heart has come online, you know, but it's like, oh, I'm just no longer bound by karma. So for me, it's like such a strange time because I didn't really have any framework for it. I didn't have anyone who went before me to talk to about it. I literally just felt like I had, and I use this, and it's not perfect, but I had somehow felt like I had fallen down a well, right? And, you're at the bottom of the well and you're looking up and there's a light. And I knew that somehow up there where that light was my life. And, stuff would happen. People would come along and want to talk to me. And it felt like every time it was like an effort for me to shift my awareness out of that dark well, up into the light, to talk to somebody, to interact. to be in the world. And then as soon as I would stop, my awareness would come back down into the well. And I this is what happened. This is just how I felt at the time. I felt like I had broken my human. My human was gone. I had broken it. There was no coming back. There was no way for me to come back into being human anymore. And I know that sounds really, really strange to people because, you're looking at a body, there's words coming out of my mouth, but it's like at the core, it's like I'm not human anymore. I'm not a being. I'm not a who. I feel like I'm like a what or a nothing, right? And you're now in the world somehow tethered here and nothing at the same time. And it actually feels like you become a ghost. And it's a very, very strange place to be. And I mean, you know, a lot of my Zoom meetings, everybody wants to talk to me about Brahman. It seems to be the one where everybody's really, really interested. So what also happened going through the shift into Brahman was that the love kind of disappears in it. The bliss, the Shakti energy disappears. Um, the connectedness, the energy, and you honestly feel like you are a black hole. So I was about 2 years then in this state, um, integrating it, and it really took me 2 years. And I remember there was a couple of videos I put up from my Zoom discussions. And I remember one day people asked me about it and actually feeling like I was fighting off tears, really, really fighting off tears, um, holding back the tears just because I just felt like I had lost humanity. I'd lost the, my, look, there is something special about being human, right? It's like there's a lot of nostalgia and good times and love and family and friends. And when you shift into something like Brahman, it's like that's broken. You're never gonna be in the world. You're never gonna operate the way you once did. And I mean, it changes, and it's not like you suffer, but there definitely is a nostalgia when you look back and you go, oh, I can kind of remember what it was like, the excitement, the family get-togethers, the looking forward to things. And now all of a sudden you're just feeling like you're nothing. You're absolutely nothing. But also there is a coming out of that. Like in one sense, right? You never come out of Brahman. I've heard people saying like, you come out of Brahman, right? You don't ever come out of Brahman. You become Brahman. There's no coming out of it, right? It's like what I talk about, your baseline, your bedrock is self-realization as you're going through your awakening. When you shift into Brahman, you are Brahman, right? That is your baseline, that is your bedrock. But there is change. There's more. There's further states that come. There's further reintegration, refinement of even Brahman consciousness, right? It it deepens, the experience unfolds. There's more getting to know it, and eventually there's a coming back in. So I hope I haven't scared you off Brahman consciousness. Yeah, I think I'm going to leave it from there. Next one I will talk about is the para Brahman, the descent back into creation and the coming back in with the divine qualities, the pure divinity. So I hope you enjoyed this video on Brahman consciousness. Yeah, until the next time, take care. Bye bye.